What's up, y'all? Let's say you happen to hear the tin whistle for the first time. Maybe you saw it in a movie or a TV show. Maybe you went to go see Riverdance or some other stage kind of production, and you decide this is something you might want to give a real go at. Your first question is probably, where do I start? What do I buy? What tunes do I learn? That's what we're talking about in this video, so stick around if that's something you're into. So first things first, what do you buy? Well, my advice is buy something halfway decent. I started out on something like this, and no offense to whoever made this, I actually have no idea. There's no label on it, I can't tell. And it's terrible. It probably cost like $8. And there's a reason why these things are cheap, because they're just not very good. They're mass produced. And the problem with something like this is as you get going along with it, you might not know whether it's the instrument or whether it's the player who's having the problem. Sometimes it's you, sometimes it's the instrument if the instrument isn't any good. If you want to go with something a little bit better, that's what I would recommend. Now, you guys know pretty well, this is what I play. This is from Gary Humphrey. I play nothing but his at this point, and they're fantastic. They're also not crazy expensive. They're about $100, as opposed to this, which is $8. And I get that $100 is a lot more than $8, but if you think that you'll be remotely serious about this, that you might want to actually play and stick with it, I would say get something in this kind of ballpark. It doesn't have to be Gary Humphrey's stuff. I'll always recommend him because I think he's great, but there's plenty of other folks that are kind of in that ballpark that are good. You know, there's other stuff that I've played. This is a Susato, this is a Generation, this is the Fadog. All these are fine, and for beginning, they're okay. But anything kind of mass produced, you might run into that issue where you're never sure if it's you or if it's the whistle that's going to be the problem. So that's where it's probably worth it just to save up a few bucks and get something halfway decent. Now the Fadogs that I was sent, this one a while back, that was a terrible sentence, that probably didn't make any sense. Fadog sent me this whistle to try out and see what I thought of it. And as mass-produced whistles go, it's not bad. So there's certainly nothing wrong with starting with something like this, but I have a feeling you're going to be a lot better off if you just spend the money and get something, you know, a little bit higher up. If this is just kind of a whim and you want to try it out and see what happens, by all means start with these. These are like $10, I think. So that's what I would say, go with something halfway decent. The other side of that story, as I bang these all over the place, this one is made by John Sint. I think these are about $200 or $300. So you don't necessarily have to jump all the way up to that. If you can and you want to, cool, you'll enjoy it. He makes great stuff too. But that's why I recommend Gary. They're reasonably priced and they're fantastic. They're awesome whistles. Now the other thing is you want to start with a D whistle. D will give you the ability to play in, obviously, the key of D, you can play in G, you can play in A, E minor, B minor, A minor, all the important keys that you need for Irish music, if that is in fact what you're trying to play. This is a C whistle, this is a B flat. You're only going to need these if you start playing with singers. The only reason I brought these is because I gave away my D Susato like 2 videos ago, so that's why I don't have it anymore. Those are loud. So again, start with the D whistle. That's going to cover you if you're trying to play in any kind of an Irish music session or any kind of Irish tunes that you might be interested in learning. Now when you've got your brand new whistle, we got to go over some of the basics, just absolute beginner basics. The first thing is just covering all the holes. What I always tell people when we're first starting out, try and play the D, the lowest note on the instrument. You'll probably be surprised how little air it requires to get that low note. You can easily jump the octave without much more, especially if you're coming from any other instrument, a brass instrument or really any other kind of woodwind. You'll be amazed how little air it actually takes to get that low note. So start with that. And the other thing is to make sure each hole is covered, because it's pretty easy, especially when you're first starting out, to do that, because I didn't quite cover that hole. You can maybe see that. Got to make sure each hole is sealed. Hopefully it'll be pretty obvious by hearing when you're not covering the holes properly, but it's one of those you want to get used to by feel alone, so you don't have to worry about accidentally making that horrible squeegee sound. The next thing is a basic scale. In this case, we're talking about a D whistle, so we're talking about a D scale, and it's just simply a matter of going up the whistle, nice and slowly. And try to keep each note nice and clean, nice and even, rhythmically, just so you get used to how much air each note requires, because it's a little bit different. As you go up the whistle, it requires a little bit more air, especially when you get into the second octave. So play all the way up to the second octave, play G scales, play A scales. I've done videos on this before, which I'll link down below if you want to go back and check those out. But that's the main thing you want to get right off the bat. As soon as you get the whistle, work on a couple of scales just to get your fingers used to it. The other real gotcha with this thing is breath control. because it's pretty easy to squeak these notes. You can kind of hear that raspy thing where the whistle isn't sure whether you want to play the bottom octave or the top octave. And I did a whole video on octave jumping, that's what I call it, and it's a real simple scale, real simple exercise, again, to get used to how much air is required for the lower octave versus the top octave. And it's one of those things that just becomes muscle memory or brain memory or breath memory, whatever you want to call it. But if you can master that, and you can master it early, it's going to make everything else a whole lot easier as you're learning the ins and outs of playing tunes, ornaments, all the fancy stuff that you want to get into. Because ultimately, I'm assuming, if you want to learn to play this instrument, you want to learn to play it like that and play it fun. So when you've locked those things down, you're going to want to start playing some tunes, because that's obviously the point of all this. So what tunes do you want to start with? When I'm teaching folks, there's a couple of Irish tunes that I always start people on. It's either going to be Raglan Road or Down by the Sally Gardens, and I've done videos for both of those, which I will also link down below. But I wouldn't necessarily say you have to start with those. I've had other folks who aren't totally committed to learning Irish music. They want to play something that they know. And that's fine. In fact, it might even be a little bit easier, because that way you don't have to worry about, is this a melody I've ever heard before? No, so now I have to learn the notes, I have to learn how the song goes. If you want to start with something, a pop song or something simple that you already have kind of in your head, nothing wrong with that at all if you want to just pick it out by ear or find sheet music. Find something simple, find something basic that's not going to require a lot of notes. You can do Mary Had a Little Lamb if you want. I don't usually teach that, just because I'd rather get folks learning Irish tunes, but those two that I mentioned before, Sally Gardens and Raglan Road, they're great ones to get started with because they're slow and they're fairly simple. If you are in fact interested in learning Irish traditional music, you're going to want to get into the jigs and reels, because that's what comes up at the sessions, that's what all the cool recordings are about, and if you're coming to this after watching a movie where they had Irish music in it, that's probably what you heard. Jigs and reels are kind of your bread and butter for Irish music. So as far as a reel goes, the one that I always start people on is Silver Spear. It's a good classic standard session tune that hasn't been worn out, so if you do learn it and you end up at a session, which for me anyway, that was always the goal, if you do end up at one, you're going to play that tune and people aren't going to give you the side eye like, oh, we got to deal with this. Jigs, I always teach a tune called Jimmy Ward's, which I've done a video on. Again, link down below, as opposed to the more common one, which is the Kesh jig. I play Jim Ward's, or I teach Jim Ward's first, just because I like it better. Pick one that you like and start with that, and pick one of those basic ones. I'm going to put a list of some basic session tunes down below. Now, once you're feeling comfortable with that, obviously the question is, what next? What do I learn next? Well, there's a ton of tunes. There's thousands of tunes. I would want to learn tunes that other people might be able to play along with me. Go out to a session. Find out what other people are playing. Ask what the name of the tunes are. Bring your phone and record it. Ask first. Make sure that people are okay with it. 9 times out of 10, people are going to say, yeah, no problem. If you want to learn some tunes, fire away and record. Come back and learn them. People will be happy to have you do that. Listen to music. Listen as much as you can. Just by osmosis, you're gonna hear some tunes that you want to learn, or you might even be able to just pick up things by ear that way, depending on how good your ear training is. But listening is crucial. Not only will it help you learn tunes and help you figure out what it is that you want to play, you'll pick up a lot of the style of this instrument just by doing that. Now, I mentioned before, everybody wants to jump ahead and get to the fun stuff. And for me, the fun stuff is the ornaments and the variations and all that kind of cool stuff. Start with the basics. Taps, cuts, and rolls. Again, bread and butter of this music, and specifically this instrument. Really, all of Irish music. Those ornaments are common across the board. But the whistle is ultimately a simple instrument. It's one that everybody starts on when they're playing Irish music, because you can get them for fairly cheap, and physically, as far as the physics of the instrument, it's simple. You don't have a bow that you have to navigate across some strings and have that squeaking all over the place. You don't have a million reeds in an accordion. You don't have a million reeds in the uilleann pipes. Any of those instruments are fundamentally more complicated. I wouldn't necessarily say difficult, because let's be honest, every instrument is difficult. If you're playing music at all, it's all challenging and it all takes some commitment. But if you're interested in it, if you are committed to it and you want to learn how to play it, hopefully some of these tips will help. Feel free to check out any of the other videos that I've got down below, any of the other stuff throughout my channel. I've covered all of these things in a lot more detail. So if this is day one for you, first of all, congratulations. Awesome. I hope you dig it. I hope you stick with it. And feel free to hit me up with any questions or comments or things that are driving you crazy. If you're getting stuck on, I'll be happy to answer any questions I can. And I will see you guys in the next one. Cheers.